Welcome back to episode 9, 10, 11 or 12 of the From the Spot podcast. We can't decide what it is. I'm joined by Luke and Lucas tonight, and we're going to talk about the Premier League running towards the end of the season. We're also going to talk about the Champions League, some big results and some big news stories that came out of that last week, and Chelsea will play Real Madrid later this week. And then we're going to talk about Leicester, because we're staying up. So, I don't know if we want to go to you first, Luke. A little bit about Frank Lampard. How do you think he's doing? Was it the right appointment? How do you assess your chances this season?
I mean, I have to say thank you, Rhys, to start off with. We just discussed the fact that we weren't going to talk about Chelsea much, and that's your opening gambit, but that's fine.
Get it out of the way nice and early.
Frank Lampard, what do I think? You cannot tarnish that man's reputation based on his playing career. I am very much firmly in the ballpark now of he just needs some time away from management for a bit. I think on his day there is a decent manager there. Like, he can set up a team in a certain way. I just think coming in to put out fires or to boost morale, whatever, as much as he knows the club or whatever, we were abysmal against Brighton. There was no cohesion. The players didn't know what they were doing. Mudryk was the only kind of sort of shining light, but all that was because he ran fast with the ball at his feet. It's a fairly low bar at the moment to impress in a Chelsea side, where I genuinely don't know where our next victory is going to come. I think we're very, very fortunate to be in the position where we've already accrued probably enough points to be safe from relegation. I don't think if push came to shove and we were really kind of languishing at the bottom, I think the players would pull their finger out enough to be like, as much as they're probably not up for a relegation fight, I think they understand how embarrassing that would be for the amount of money they earn and whatnot, of like, oh, if I really want to be attracting interest from Real Madrid or PSG or those sorts of clubs in the summer, I can't be getting relegated with Chelsea. Like, that's ridiculous.
I mean, to be fair, you're 12 points off 18th at the moment, so I'd say you're safe. But with your current form, I mean, nothing's guaranteed, is it? So
I think we were right, as I said. I think we'll be all right, but there's so much of that is down to the work that Tuchel did at the start of the season. And I think any fan would give their right arm now to be back in the place we were when Tuchel was managing. And I'm not even saying it was all rosy then. I think there wasn't a lot of naysayers of it was a bad idea to get rid of Tuchel. I think it was, he's a high-quality manager, and for what we have now, it was a bad decision. It's very drastic, but I didn't see how things were going to turn around. It did look like it was starting to go a bit sour there. He obviously wasn't having a good relationship with the board. And now we're in a position where Frank Lampard's here, and apparently that's already caused some problems with one of the candidates to take over long-term, Luis Enrique, who really wanted to come in last week and have a proper go at Real Madrid in the Champions League. But I think that's within keeping of the model of they really want to take their time over the decision. And for much of their fault, they're clearly very astute businessmen, as I've kind of touched on in the past. Whether that translates to success in football, we have to wait and see, because it clearly isn't at the moment. But they sort of know what they're doing in terms of high-risk situations with making decisions. So I think they will kind of cut out the noise, really make sure that they have the man that they want, which is more day by day looking like Nagelsmann will be the appointment. And I have my issues with that, but again, we have to back whoever comes in and really kind of see it as next season. Let's just try and make sure we get top 4, and then that would be a success. If we're building on and we're playing good football, then yeah, that for me is a good season. I think we're a few seasons and a few transfer windows of getting rid of a lot of players off from really starting to look further up the table than getting even into Europa League, how competitive it is now. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that. But for now, Frank Lampard, yeah, absolutely rate him as a player, one of my favourite players ever. But the jury's definitely out on him as a manager, and I don't know whether it makes sense, especially if we're just going to lose every game. Why don't we just keep pottering? We'll never turn on Lampard per se, but I think we all know deep down now that he's never going to be good enough to manage Chelsea properly full time.
No, absolutely. I've got to ask, though, the big question. Do you think you can pull off the impossible on Tuesday and, get a result against Real?
Yeah, I think if we just had one player who in front of goal was in a good vein of form and was scoring, I would have quite high hopes. Because if Real Madrid play anywhere near as kind of in cruise control as they were in the first leg, well, they really should have put us to bed. They should have won 4-5-0, but they didn't. 2 goals is not the most unsurmountable kind of scoreline to get back into. And then we go to penalties, and then who knows? Whether they score against us is definitely a consideration, because Vinicius Junior, I think, could turn anyone inside out if he's feeling up for it. And Benzema's obviously he's got that Benzema tax. You never know what sort of mood he's going to be in. And for a 5-minute period, he could become the best player on the planet, and then that's all he needs to do to score 2 goals. But you've got to look at it and think there's hope. The hope I have very much dwindles when I think of who we're going to have up front and who we're going to have in midfield and how we're going to set up, because we have to go for it. And maybe that works in our favour, because it keeps the tactics simple. It keeps the team talk simple. And if we get the first goal, who knows? The problem being is we have to be tight at the back. And I just don't see it. I don't see it. Especially when you're getting... anyone can beat Kepa from about 30 yards out if they hit it hard enough and hit it in the corner enough. And I don't think Mendy will be starting. So I'm always hopeful, but I think we already probably know that this is the end of the Champions League journey for Chelsea this year.
I think moving across London as well, Lucas, obviously to Arsenal, more drop points on the weekend. I mean, City are what? Is it 4 points behind now?
Yeah, with the game in hand.
And they've still got to play you. I think, to be honest, personally, I think it's going to be whoever wins that game between you both wins the league. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think of course the draw isn't ideal yesterday, but it always was going to be whoever won at the Etihad. I mean, yesterday though, I don't know, I saw a bit of arrogance in the Arsenal side that we've not really seen this season. I mean, the reason that the penalty came was because Partey tried to do some cool overhead kick at the edge of his box foot against Declan Rice. And then, I won't get into all this VAR stuff because no one cares about that. But then, I mean, but the arrogance comes, but then so does the individual errors. And then I've looked at where we've dropped points this season, or even won, and it's always our own errors, like the Everton bad defending from the corner. You've got Brentford with the bad officiating mistakes. Man City, Tomiyasu's back pass. I could go on for ages. And then Liverpool, when the game management and the second goal could have done a lot better. And then, but I do think there's calls for Arteta for substitutes though, because it's now West Ham, Man United and Liverpool where we've all dropped points, and I blame Arteta a bit for the subs. He's not risky enough. Saka seems to be immune from being taken off even if he's not playing well. I love Saka, but against Liverpool and West Ham he clearly wasn't at it. And then we took Odegaard off against Liverpool. We're looking to get a sneaky goal for in the counter. Who's good for that? The technical ability of Odegaard. Then you bring on Kivior. So I just think it's mistakes. But I do think it is still in our hands. Whether the probability of us winning the league has changed, I'd say it has. But all this media rubbish of it's not in our hands anymore. We can draw at the Etihad and still win the league. City don't have that luxury. I don't want us to play for a draw at the Etihad, but it's possible. And then I don't actually mind that we play City at the Etihad. I think it just gives us more control over our destiny. To try and get 3 points more on top of them. But yeah.
I mean, you touched on complacency there with Arsenal, but I think Man City are getting a bit complacent as well. We noticed it in the game against Leicester on the weekend, where they were brilliant in that first half, and Pep made changes at half time, which he's getting criticised for, being a bit cocky and playing a B team. But Man City's B team should still be pushing for the top 4 if they were their own little team. They're not a bad B team. They are still one of the better teams in the league, if not Europe. So for Leicester to come out in that second half Under a new manager, they've only played 45 minutes under. At the Etihad, where they're 3-0 down, to then go on and win the second half, should have won it by more than they did, and then outperform City on XG. There's something that's maybe not right, not gelling with that City team, and I'm not sure what it is, or whether it is just that they've got a bit cocky, they're 3-0 up against 19th in the league. Okay, easy 3 points. But I don't think we can just say, okay, Arsenal are the arrogant ones here, they're top of the league for the first time in God knows how long, like City will walk over them. Because City have got mentality problems themselves.
Yeah, but the difference is that City nipped the game in the bud like very early on. Like it was clear for the whole game that City was going to win, and we had scored our first 2 goals inside the 15th minute, and it wasn't that obvious that we were actually going to win. So I don't know. I think Pep's also got the game midweek, so maybe it's actually just smartness more than arrogance. We don't play until Friday against Southampton, so I don't know. I think City's maybe got a bit more leeway to put a B team in the second half there.
Yeah, to kind of jump off the back of that point, I think, yeah, you're right. I think Guardiola, deep down, his aim is still the Champions League. He knows that will set him apart of really, really making a difference in Man City. As much as they've done the 100 points and they're free flowing and they're going to potentially be doing 3 in a row, you're looking at it as the Champions League is where the focus is. That's why Haaland was brought in. He was that difference maker, because they could have stuck with Alvarez as the replacement for Aguero, and they probably would still be doing just as well in the league. I think there's only been a handful of games probably that Haaland, you could say, has won for them, but that's not to say that they can still play better without him. There's still that kind of argument. I think, yeah, you're right. That complete difference of they're 3-0 up or whatever against Leicester. Yes, they maybe get a bit complacent, but there was never any doubt that they weren't going to win. And I think if it had gone to 3-2, their mentality would have completely shifted. Like they would have completely played. They would have just kept the ball. And they have that ability to just absolutely suffocate teams. Your point, actually, Lucas, about it's quite good that the game is at the Etihad for you and for Arsenal, Man City. I hadn't really thought about, but actually that does make a lot of sense, because it will enable the pressure to almost be off Arsenal. Like, if we lose here, we lose here. We've still had a brilliant season. The fact that we are comfortably in the Champions League and we've pushed one of the best sides in Europe this far for our entire season. Yes, we were so close, and if it doesn't end up being successful, it's a disappointment, but it's not a failure. It's an incredible season, and you're not in the same ballpark as City in terms of the ability to have a bench as strong as they do. As you said, Rhys, to have a B team that could probably get in top 4 themselves. But you're looking at it and thinking, being away at the Etihad, we haven't got 60,000 Arsenal fans that are going to be maybe nervous from the off. So the energy's a little bit, you won't have that, because there's only going to be the travelling support. And all they're going to be doing is singing songs and really getting behind the team for the whole 90 minutes. They're not going to be having a nervous quietness around them if there's a sloppy pass made or a gasp of an intake when there's a corner that's looped in that Ramsdale is scrambling for it. You're not going to have that. So long as they stick to their job, and they play how they can play, and you've got one of the best managers to kind of outthink Guardiola, because he's been there, he's been in the war room where they've been planning their own tactics over the years. He knows how they will probably set up, and it's the perfect game for Pep to overthink it as well. When he knows that they've got to go out and win to keep the pressure on, he might decide that he's going to play John Stones in midfield, which he's been doing for the last couple of weeks. And if Arteta knows that's going to happen, then you could play a different style. You don't know. So I think, yeah, that was actually a really, really interesting point to say that playing away is probably a good thing. And yeah, there is so much to play for, because for a team that have, as you say, only through individual errors and mistakes and minute lapse of judgment, that shows you the kind of level of detail that you need now to win the Premier League. I mean, the last time even Chelsea won it, the only reason we won it is because we were able to play a style of football that wasn't necessarily planned for probably about 16, 17 teams in the league. so we could just blow them away because they're not expecting to have that overlapping wing backs or the three at the back marking out their striker. They're not expecting it. The season after it immediately is nowhere near as good because every team has it as a plan B. They've learned how to play it. They've practiced in pre-season over the summer to play against that style of football. So to now be at a point where you're even in the conversation of winning the league, when last season, as I say, you were unfortunate to not get your Champions League football through your own fault ultimately, to now be at this point, I think is a great step forward. I still don't know. I mean, I've been for the last few weeks kind of saying that I think it's still City's to lose, and I do sort of think that they've got enough hunger there of your Grealishes and your Haalands that haven't won it that will want to win the league, and then enough there that. Sorry. No, I know Grealish has won the league. I mean, that there's enough there that there's new players that want to win the league, but also there's some old heads that have done it and know what they're doing. It really comes down to that game. But I think, as you say, a draw for Arsenal is so much better than it is for City, and there's nothing to say now that Arsenal, although they've looked a bit nervy after that game, don't go on and use that as a springboard to win all the remaining games, and the league is theirs. So. It's a really, really exciting end to the season, especially at the top, but also at the bottom of the table to see how things are going to end up.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that battle for Europe, Brentford and Fulham have kind of dropped off it a little bit now, haven't they? You know, a few bad results of Brentford, you know, a loss to Wolves, a loss to Newcastle, a loss to United. That's not really helped them out. And Fulham haven't been brilliant either. I know they got that win at Goodison Park, but they lost 4 or 5 before that. And so they've dropped down it now. I mean, they're closer to Chelsea than they were before. So when you think that a couple of weeks ago, we were going on about how brilliantly Fulham are doing and you know, Chelsea are lingering below that, you know, such close rivals geographically. But now Liverpool are back up there pushing, and Brighton are up there, and Villa have suddenly ended up in 6th, which has gone so under the radar until this week. I thought they were lingering like 10th, 11th, but they're out there in 6th. I mean, I think the job that they're doing at Villa is sensational. They've not had a big transfer budget. Ollie Watkins is in the form of his life. And now they're challenging for, if not the Champions League, the Europa League.
It's a fair point with Villa. They're definitely playing extremely well, and they look very well set up. They know what they're doing on the pitch, and they know exactly how they're going to perform kind of week in, week out. But I don't know this rhetoric of they kind of come out of nowhere, because they do on paper probably have quite a comfortable top 10 squad. They're less of a surprise for me than, say, a Brentford or a Fulham, because it was very much that Steven Gerrard was underperforming with that team. You look at like Kamara, Douglas Luiz, McGinn as a midfield. That's really quite a strong and highly rated midfield. Ollie Watkins, Leon.
Yeah, I was also just meaning like in terms of the media coverage it's got. You know what I mean? Like Fulham and Brentford have been in the press for the whole season of, oh my God, look how well they're doing. No one's really talked about Villa until recently, and it's kind of like they're actually up there performing better at the moment, and it's taken so long for them to get the recognition they deserve.
No, that's a very fair point. It's very valid, I think, because you still have to go out and do what they're doing. And I think from where they were to where they are, it's an incredible transformation. And it's got to be one where if you didn't have Arteta and Arsenal playing as well as they were, or City and Pep doing as well, or De Zerbi with Brighton or Thomas Frank with Brentford, Emery would be one like an outsider or a front runner for manager of the season, because he's come in, completely revitalised that squad. And he's got players that really look like championship level players that you were worried had made too big of a move, and they're playing to the level that we kind of always thought they could get to. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to do that. It shows your ability as a coach. But I think Emery was always a high level coach, and it's just that time at Arsenal, there was a lot going on in the background. There was a lot going on with certain players in the squad that Arteta has been able to get rid of, so they're in a lot better place in that sense. But yeah, for me, I think Fulham, you have to take into account a lot of their recent drop-off is probably down to they were really going around and training probably with their tail between their legs from that FA Cup defeat to Man United, because they had that game in their hands and they threw it away with moments of madness where Mitrovic losing his head, now getting a 10-game ban, their manager getting a red card because he runs into the technical area when they're checking VAR, which you just know isn't the right thing to do. So there's probably a few weeks of fallout from that where they're going, oh, what could have been? We could have been in a semi-final playing at Wembley, who knows? But then, you got the result against Everton at Goodison Park, which is really, really bad result for Everton. That is a game there where you've got to be thinking at least a point. A point is probably not even good enough against the team that is very much on the beach now. But no, they played really well. They took their chances well. They had quality. There was goals coming from their kind of second string players. I think they to be where they are for Fulham is phenomenal. Kind of given what they've done in the last few years, where they're just very much a yo-yo team. They're in that West Brom, Norwich kind of group of teams that go up and down every year. But it's Brentford as well. I think for them, there's probably a lot going on in the background there in terms of what are they planning to do for the summer. Maybe Thomas Frank has already had conversations with other clubs about taking over at other clubs in the summer. We don't really know. There's a lot of this stuff may come out down the line. But no, I think it's the realism of the Premier League. Games come thick and fast, and at this point in the season, you've got a lot of tired legs. Even if you haven't got injuries, you've got players that maybe aren't performing at their optimum. They know the season ends in a few weeks, and they're just focused on trying to get wins as best you can. If you don't win, it's not the end of the world because you're not going to go down. So your mentality does shift, and it's a different style of management to keep people pushing to say, let's go and try and get the Europa Conference League than it is to let's stay up. Because once you've comfortably achieved that, then you do want to kind of switch off because you feel like you deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talking about that relegation battle as well, it's closer than it has been all season now. I mean, Southampton, I think they're favourites to go down, 23 points from 31 games. You don't deserve to stay up. Then Leicester, again, you look at 25 points and you think, dead and buried, that's it, you're gone. But that second half at Man City, and I know I've talked about it already so much, and not just tonight, but in the group chat with you both. If we play like that for the rest of the season and carry that momentum in, we'll be fine. Do you know what I mean? I think Dean Smith coming in, he's not the best manager, and I'm not saying he is, but it's just someone new. And I think giving players like Soyuncu a fresh start, he came on, he was one of the better defenders against City on the weekend, but he's played 2 games before that all season because disagreement with Brendan Rodgers. You can't be letting, at such a high level, you can't be letting such a personal disagreement affect the course of the season. Because if Soyuncu had been playing since September, we wouldn't be in this situation. We would be, not top 10, but 13th or 14th. And it's not good enough, but we wouldn't be in a relegation battle with 7 games left to go. So, and then John Terry coming in, steady the ship defensively. I'd rather him probably on the pitch than on the bench, but it'd be a better job than a couple of them. Dan and Marty. And then Craig Shakespeare, someone that knows the club and knows the history and got us to that Champions League quarter-final, and someone that's been there through the highest moments and now's there through some of the lowest. It's perfect because he's got that relationship with players like Vardy, get them firing back again. Because Vardy this season, do you know what I mean? If it was anyone else and he didn't do what he did in 2015-16, they'd be caused, just retire, mate. That's it. You shouldn't be anywhere near the starting lineup. And I do think it is a little bit sentimental, the fact that he still gets in there and kind of he's almost protected to a degree, like you were saying about Saka at Arsenal, star boy and such a poster boy for the club. I think Vardy's like that at Leicester, and I think it is time to move on.
No, but Saka actually scores goals, Rhys, by the way, yeah.
Vardy's forgotten how to do that.
Yeah, but that's my point. You can't keep someone in the squad just because they were good once. That 2015-16 season, he was the best striker in the world. Yeah, I'm biased, but it's facts. Someone that was playing non-league, chucking Red Bulls and whatever before games, If you can go out in the Premier League and bang in goals in 11 consecutive games, mate, you're the best striker in the world. So it is. It's just sentimental. Oh, let's keep it as it was. That's what's cost us. And I think people are like turning on Kuntop now as well and going, he should have sacked Rodgers ages ago, whatever. But do you know what I mean? I know, like, you can't pin everything on one event, but Vichai's death has kind of turned running the club into an emotional thing for Top now, where you can't separate the two, because whenever you think of Leicester, you think of your dad. And so it's almost like that reluctance to make change. I think that's ultimately what's cost us.
It's a fair point. I think the kind of, as you say, level of sentiment around the club is that your approach is very family orientated. It's fan orientated. It's a club that is there for kind of the everyman of let's get behind, let's support people, let's try our best and maximize our potential. Yeah.
But in there about the whole fact that it's, a club for the working man. I sent you to the screenshot earlier of what the club are doing now with away days. I don't know if anyone else has seen it, but they're picking, I think it's about a third to a fifth of fans going to away games now, and you have to show ID to collect your ticket. It's so meant to curb ticket reselling and everything. But one, if you're going to introduce that, why introduce it now? Because who's going to be paying over the odds to come and watch us? No one. I'd rather go and watch Sunday League, to be honest. Two, if you want to sell your ticket because you can't make it, you should be grateful we've got fans showing up willing to take the spot. Like, how many other clubs that have been performing so well for so many seasons and now suddenly 19th would turn down fans coming anyway? Like, you need the support you can get. Don't turn them away because they've not got ID. And they only send the emails out with 3 days' notice. So if you got told that you need to have photo ID when you buy the ticket, fair enough. If you've not got any, you wouldn't buy it. But you've bought the ticket, partly with 30 quid, and then you get sprung on you 3 days before the game that, because you're over 18, you've not got a passport, you've not got a driving licence. You can't come and get your ticket, you can't watch the game, but we can't give you a refund either. It's a joke. We've gone from being one of the best run clubs and most fan-orientated clubs in the league to one of the most self-absorbed kind of, no, this is the way we're doing it, regardless if it makes sense or not. We are one of the worst run clubs in the league now. Maybe not financially, but fan experience wise, it's dire. Anyway, you can go back to what you were saying now. Sorry for butting in.
No, I mean that's a fair point. I mean, less potentially about the running of the club, but maybe the attitude towards the football of Rodgers has done well. He's got us where we've got that success in the FA Cup, the success in the Community Shield. Let's give him time. Are we going to be able to attract any better in terms of high-level manager? I think you could, because there's a project there. There is an ability. You've got a brilliant training facility. So you'd like to think that with the right style of manager, someone in the model of an Eric Ten Hag who likes to kind of oversee everything would be really good. If you could find a profile of that sort to be your next manager long term, then I think that would be really, really useful. But no, again, you're an underperforming team with the quality of the squad you have. You're starting 11. A lot of it, again, comes down to you haven't been able to get consistent goals. If you had Iheanacho in the form he was in, I think it was end of last season, where he was just scoring sort of for fun, he was keeping Vardy out of the team. To kind of touch on Vardy, I think we are at a point now where age is catching up to him. I think he's still got a lot going on in his personal life, what with all the stuff with Colleen Rooney and his wife, and there's probably a lot of fallout from that maybe is going on behind the scenes we don't know about. I also probably imagine that he's thinking, how much longer have I got left in me? Because I don't want to absolutely ruin my body, because I haven't taken care of it anyway, really. So I want to be able to still walk when I'm in my 50s. So I think there's a lot of different factors when you look at someone like that who plays football not for the kind of, I'd say, professionalism of it. I mean, he is a professional, but you know what I mean. He just plays because he likes playing football, and that's why he's a determined footballer. There's not much else probably he wants to do or could really focus on doing. So he does. I'm not saying he's someone who treats his body like a temple, like a Ronaldo type, who is trying to eke every last drop of his career out. But it's a funny place to be in, and I think, as you say, yeah, Rodgers probably should have gone earlier. There was a lot of talk. I think as you were mentioning, Rhys, about the transfers of some of the players he brought in. We completely ignored the advice of the club, where they made investments in players like Vestergaard and Bertrand, who really up.
Yeah, players who we scoring goals past. It's like there's no logic.
But they really aren't. They aren't steps forward at all, because as much as I know we were talking before about Luke Thomas not being up for it, surely it's better to try and give him some minutes than it is to bring in Bertrand, who doesn't like has no affinity with the club.
He's barely played since we brought him in as well. Like he's just not the quality. Anyone could have seen that.
Yeah, and has no pride in wanting to be in the team. Yeah, like
anyone could have seen that he's just not the quality we need. But Brendan Rodgers knows best, doesn't he? So
he would have been 10 years ago when he was leaving Chelsea and trying to make a name for himself. When he first went to Southampton, for example, he was great. But that's not the player you're getting now. You're getting a player that is essentially a seasoned Premier League veteran and just isn't really bothered anymore.
I think, to be fair, Brendan Rodgers has sabotaged potentially his top flight managerial career by staying on for as long as he did at Leicester, because everyone else looking from the outside in, and I know you can't always see exactly what's going on inside a club, but everyone else could see exactly what was going wrong and saw it happening last season before the results were even this bad. But he's just hung on, and he's stubborn. He didn't change. The substitutions were awful. Ignored everyone's advice, and was just straight up in denial. Saying that when Palace had 31 shots against us and we had like 7 or something stupid like that, saying that we deserved to win. No, we didn't. Just admit that your time's up, and that's it. And touching on Vardy again as well. I think, as much as I don't want him to retire, he's got to at some point. And I think if we go down this season, that's time for him to retire, but he won't be seen in as high stead as if he retired at the end of last season, when we were still on a fairly high. It's easy now to say, okay, now we've gone down to the Championship, I'll retire, I can't be arsed with that. And I think that's the attitude that a lot of people will think that he has if we go down this season and he does hang up his boots.
Yeah, that's definitely a point there. I think, yeah, you're right. It would have been because was last season the Conference League season?
Last season was, yeah. That was one where we got to the semis and should have won it.
So that could have been great. Do you think if you had won it, he may have retired then?
No, I think he was destined to stay on regardless. And to be fair, I think winning it would have meant we went down this season. It sounds counterintuitive, but winning the Europa Conference League isn't going to attract big talents to your club. It's not like you've won the Europa League or the Champions League. It's kind of like it's a trophy for trophy's sake. No one goes out and goes, okay, this season we're going to win the Conference League. You would rather crack on domestically. But I think if we'd have won that, he'd be even more complacent because, okay, we've won the FA Cup, we've won the Community Shield, we've won the Conference League as well. That's 3 trophies in 4 years. You can't tell me that's not successful. And I think if you had the argument if we won a trophy last season, you'd be like, okay, it's an off season. There's nothing we can do about it. We'll be back to it next year. Things happen. It's obviously not my fault. I can win trophies.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And I do look at Rodgers, and I know you're saying about not having top flight managerial career. I still sort of see him as someone that will, for example, when Vincent Kompany gets poached and goes to a big club after Burnley come up, he probably stays with them another year. They do well. He will go, whether that be in Europe or in the Premier League, he'll go. I know he's eyeing the Man City job when Guardiola goes. Of course he is. But Brendan Rodgers is the kind of manager that would probably go in at Burnley and they'd say, oh, well, we're not going to go for a keep us up relegation scrap manager. We'll go for someone who has an element of style and does know how to win things. Whether that's the right sort of decision, I don't know. And you're right. I think a lot of his success in terms with the FA Cup and those sorts of things has sort of masked an ongoing problem that has just got slowly worse and worse until a point now where it's, if you didn't have Maddison in your team, things could be a lot worse than they already are. There's a handful of players that are probably the same. I mean, the fact that you went into the season without a recognised goalkeeper that had real experience in the league, it's kind of mind-boggling, because as much as Ward he's tried his best, I really think he has, but he isn't up to the level. He's not. He's a number two that can maybe come in for a couple games, and if he doesn't do very well, it's not the end of the world. He's not someone that can last out a 38 game season. He just isn't. I mean, I think it's too late in his career now to have done that. And I know that he originally moved, because he was from Liverpool, wasn't he? Did he move to Leicester to do that? And it was a very weird decision when he was playing behind Kasper Schmeichel, because he moved to get game time, and he obviously was never going to play above Schmeichel. So
It's a strange one, because everyone that I know that I spoke to said Daniel Iverson at the start of the season should have been starting ahead of Ward, because a younger keeper, try and get him to a decent standard, and if he performs well, move him on in the summer, get some good money for him, and bring in, okay, we can't afford it this season, but bring in a better keeper, a more recognised keeper next year. But we've done the opposite. We played Ward, who's declining, not even really getting picked as well as his number one now. I think Hennessy's kind of nailed that down. It's like, what are you trying to achieve with that? Like, he's not confident. He's been on the bench for so long. Iverson was out on loan. I don't know if it was last season or the season before. He's had game time recently. Like, I get Ward's name is probably a little bit bigger because he's been playing for Wales and whatever. But again, it goes back to that sentimental thing of picking the bigger names. You need someone that's in form and has actually played a game recently.
And he just has some ludicrous decision making as well, like coming off his line and being in weird places for shots that he shouldn't have been beaten by. Like, there's loads of times I've watched him and been like, I think there's maybe a Premier League level keeper in there somewhere, but then he just does some very strange decisions.
It was so inconsistent. Like, you had that period about like October, November, like before the World Cup, where you were actually winning games and playing good football. And it was like, he's a completely different man. Like, that is not Danny Ward in between the sticks. And then you come back from the World Cup and we're back to God knows what form. And he's back to what you saw in August and September. Like, you don't know what you're getting with him. Like, he could be prime Manuel Neuer or like Champions League final Luis Karius. There's no in between.
Oh, he had concussion.
Yeah, well, ignoring that, Danny Ward plays like he's got concussion half the time, so...
That's fair. That's a fair point. The Soyuncu one's quite interesting as well, because wasn't he touted to go to Atletico Madrid in January as well?
Whether it happens now or not, I think, to be honest, if we stay up, Dean Smith should stay. You can't bring someone in for 7 games, 8 games, and go, all right, you've kept us off. You've kept us up, now sod off. Like, it's not really fair on him, because the players would have bonded with him at that point, and obviously, when we look so destined to go down, if he can turn that round, the players obviously gelled with him, and there's an understanding there. So I think if he stays on, Soyuncu might stay. He's given him a chance to get back into the team now. He played all right. Obviously, that was his first game back in so long. He's only going to get better over the next couple of weeks. It depends how much Atletico are willing to offer, to be fair. I'm not sure what the rumoured fee is. But if it's such a good deal that Top feels like he can't turn it down, then I think he'll go. But if it's like bang average and it's kind of like, okay, like that's a decent fee, but at the same time, who can we replace him with for the same money? Like, because that's got to come into it at some point. We can't afford to be spending huge amounts of money. Like, he's written off the debt that the club's got and everything.
We'll give you Rob Holding.
Do you know what? I'd take him over some of our centre-backs. I really would.
Wouldn't do a swap deal with Soyuncu, though, would you?
Soyuncu's decent, and I said this before, like, he is genuinely...
Better than Rob Holding.
Like, I genuinely do love Soyuncu, and like, even the photos that got put out, and I know they're only going to post positive photos. They're only going to post positive photos, and if things aren't going well behind the scenes, they're not going to show you it. But the photos they put up of like Yuri Tielemans, he was smiling for the first time in God knows how long. And like, if that's the attitude that having Dean Smith, Craig Shakespeare, and John Terry can bring, then we need to keep them, because if you can turn our like best players who haven't been happy in a year, 2 years, like, and have a smile on their face again, then you're doing something right. Even if the performances on the pitch don't come, and I think, I'm not saying they will come. I'd like to think they will, and I do think out of the rest of the teams, we've probably got a better chance of staying up than like your likes of Southampton, your Evertons, because it is that new manager bounce. And yeah, we didn't get the result against City, but we played well, and I think if it was any team, I think if it was any team other than City, we would have probably scratched a point. But you can't really judge it off, okay, you lost to City because it's City, they're in a title fight, and they are one of the best teams in the world. They saw off Bayern 3-0 in midweek. That's not something that any team can do. So I do have faith, and I think if we pick up a win and maybe 2 draws from our last 7 games, we should be safe, I think. Also, the win isn't going to be against the likes of Newcastle or whatever. I mean, they've dropped off it again recently, so you never know, do you?
For you, Rhys, what's the difference between a Southampton that deserves to get relegated for having 23 points and a Leicester that doesn't deserve to get relegated for having 25? Is it purely because of what Dean Smith did in that second half? I'm genuinely curious. I'm not even trying to have a dig.
No, I've got to be honest, a little bit of backstory. I do have a family friend who supports Southampton, and I always give them stick for, they're going to go down. But no, this season, I just don't think any of the decisions they've made have been right. And I know you could say the same about Leicester. But the whole Nathan Jones appointment, what was that? The board at Southampton, I don't know what they're thinking. I really don't. They're in cloud cuckoo land of, we'll appoint him, he's done all right in the Championship. And I know it's a gamble when you poach someone from a lower division. And bringing him in, he had 12 games, was it, before they sacked him? If you're going to take a gamble on someone, give them the whole season. Because otherwise you're just replacing manager after manager after manager. It's like what they've done at Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? You've had 3, 4 managers this season? It is stupid. You're never giving a manager time to gel.
I think Nathan Jones is a funny one, though, because he almost talked himself into getting the sack.
Yeah, it's a strange one. It is.
He was so argumentative and so negative, and he was a punt anyway. I think that it was an interesting appointment, and it was one of those where you think, okay, he's done fairly well with the Championship side that shouldn't be anywhere near where they are. And I think there's a lot of credit for him there. But yeah, it was a step up, and it was an arrogance. It was.
But then, to be fair, you look at you say that Luton don't deserve to be where they are, but they're still now, even after he's gone, looking like favourites for promotion. So I think it's not necessarily what he's done. It is just a genuinely really good team that maybe people wouldn't have expected at the start of the season.
I mean more from a financial standpoint in terms of what they're working with. I think, yeah, you're right. They're clearly a very good crop of players, but to be in this position to build and work in that direction, then there's some promise there, I suppose. And again, it's just, not in the same vein, but it's the same comparison of saying how much of Brighton's success now is from the base of Potter giving De Zerbi that standpoint to jump off from. I think it's very clear De Zerbi is a very high class manager, and he's now in a position where he's getting a lot of quality. But how much of that as well comes down to the backroom staff and the scouting network that Brighton have, because they can pick up 17-year-olds from the Colombian Second League and no one's ever heard of them, and they're some of the best players. They're going to go for 30-40 million in 2 years to Atalanta or something, wherever it may be. Do you know, that's the kind of model they have. And I think Southampton tried to do that by bringing in Bazunu, Bella Kotchap, Lavia. There's a lot of Mara up front. There's a lot of young talent there that I think is very high level, but there's not enough quality and experience. Losing someone like Oriol Romeu is a big blow. Those sorts of players that have been there for a few years, have dug in, know the Premier League. I think they probably changed too much too quickly. Then they changed with the managerial side of things. I think if they kept Hassan Hutel, I don't think they'd be any worse off, would they? They would have more points by now, as much as it was up and down. He is like that as a manager. They go through patches where they're god awful and they lose 9-0, and then they turn it around. He rebuilds their confidence and they're able to win 2-1, 3-1 games, and you sort of forget about them, ever considered them as a relegation team. And he did that with lesser teams, I think, than probably the actual quality they have on paper. But there's a lot of factors. I mean, Livramento was one of their best players, and he hasn't played now for 16 months or whatever. But when he was playing, he was one of the best players in the league in that position. And there's many different things. And I think, yeah, Lucas's point is right to say there's not a lot of difference between Leicester and Southampton. I think Leicester, in terms of the quality and the age and their ability in the Premier League, you have more in Leicester. And to have a player like Yuri Tillemans to think that he would be in a side that gets relegated to the Championship is a bit crazy. But then again, that's down to his attitude. If he's had a problem with Brendan Rodgers, he's not played. He clearly doesn't want to be at the club long term. He thinks he's better than the club. And he's probably got an argument, but at the end of the day, there are players that are much better than Yuri Tillemans that have never downed tools in their team and have always given their all, but never be dropped from the starting lineup because you think their mind is elsewhere or their attention is elsewhere. So I don't see how much of an argument there is for that.
I think, to be fair, it's just looking at recent history, isn't it? You know what I mean? Leicester have won so much, and it's kind of like cemented themselves as such an important Premier League team. Like, they've done things that 10 years ago no one would have thought possible. Like, it's been such a fairy tale story. And I know I said earlier about avoiding being sentimental, but it is like no one looks at Southampton, what they've done in the Prem during their stint there, and gone, that is sensational. Like, we can't afford for them to get relegated. You look at Leicester, and I don't think anyone, with the exception of maybe Forest fans and Spurs fans because of that whole coming third in the 2-horse race, I don't think anyone wants Leicester to go down as a neutral, because we are that fairy tale story that, you know, you can come up from the Championship, nearly get relegated, and go on to do incredible things in the seasons afterwards. But we're going to wrap it up there because I want to get off and watch Liverpool versus is it Leeds tonight?
Yeah. Another relegation contender.
So we will leave it there. We'll be back next week for episode, oh God, what is it? 10, 11?
10.
But yeah, we're going to wrap it up there, and we'll see you all next week.